Hello, and welcome to the latest video from Oakleigh Watches, where we will be discussing the Cartier Santos. There are those watches that shout for attention, and then there are those watches that are just effortlessly stylish, and they just exist. The people who wear them know that they're wearing something stylish, and they don't need to make a fuss about it. That's exactly where the Cartier Santos fits into the watchmaking realm. It fits really well into the latest Devil Wears Prada movie. In the first movie, Cartier were quite ubiquitous. There were quite a lot of Cartier watches in that film. And when I watched the sequel recently, I noticed that there were more. That's because they really do fit the style of the people that are there. They are quite style led. They're not overtly flashy. They know about quality, and they know about couture. They know what they're talking about. That's where Cartier fits in absolutely perfectly, both as a gent's watch and as a lady's. Perhaps the most interesting thing about the Santos is that it's not just a fashionable, stylish watch. It's actually one of the most important wristwatches ever made. It would be wrong to say that it was the first ever wristwatch, because I'm sure people were strapping pocket watches to their wrists with bits of string way before this was designed. But a very famous pilot called Santos Dumont approached his friend Louis Cartier because he wanted a watch that he could strap to his wrist while he was flying. And in 1904, Cartier produced the Santos for him as a prototype, as the world's first production wristwatch. It went into production in 1905, and we still have it in production today. The most interesting thing is that way before the design of lots of today's sports watches, the Cartier Santos was already square, which was an original shape for any kind of watch. It had exposed screws, giving it a sporty, engineered kind of a feel. It was very, very legible. And of course, it strapped to the wrist, which was a whole new concept for a production watch. I've got 4 different Cartier Santos watches to show you today, 3 in the traditional gent size and 1 in the more modern size. I'm going to start by picking up this one. This is a quartz Santos Galbée from the late 1990s, early 2000s. Galbée means it has a curved case that hugs to the wrist. These are most prominent with the quartz movements rather than the automatic. Classic white dial that's gone a little bit creamy with a little patina. An unusual Roman numeral dial for this watch. And of course, the classic Cartier sapphire cabochon. That's a genuine sapphire in the crown there, called the cabochon. Around the late 1990s, early 2000s, a watch of this size was not at all unusual for a gent's watch. This is 29 millimeters across, although it is quite a lot longer, 34 millimeters from top to bottom. So it curves and hugs the wrist in a very, very stylish way. So this is the classic kind of styling of the Santos. If we move to the second one now, this is a bimetal Santos. There's not a great deal of gold on a bimetal Santos, so they tend to add a hint of luxury rather than being overly shouty. As you can see with this watch, it has gold screws in the stainless steel bracelet, and it has a gold bezel. That's normally the extent of the gold that you see on a Cartier Santos. Probably normally has gold hands. This one is slightly unusual because it has gold Roman numeral markers on the dial. That gives it a really luxurious, beautiful touch, particularly as the dial on this has a definite sunburst pattern and kind of a fume effect. It's like a champagne fume. It fades towards the center of the dial and gets slightly darker towards the outsides. Purely as a matter of interest, the third one I want to show you today is this boutique-only Cartier motif dial Santos. If you look carefully at the grey Roman numeral dial on this 29mm Santos Galbée, what you'll see is that it is covered in very, very subtly etched Cartier logos. It's called a motif dial. They're really very, very rare. You see very few of them around, and very interesting just to show this as an example. Of course, over recent years, the trend for gents watches has gone towards larger sizes, and Cartier have gone with that trend. What we've got here is one of the very latest Cartier Santos gents watches, with a beautiful blue faded dial. This is a 41 millimeter watch, so much, much more suited to modern tastes. Around 2000, with the advent of the Cartier Roadster, Cartier invented a very clever quick change strap bracelet system that works just by pushing a small button on the back of the case, which allows you to remove the bracelet in seconds, and you can then replace it with a leather strap or a different bracelet. It really gives you the opportunity to completely change your watch in, as I said, seconds. Very, very clever system, very secure, very quick changing. So the modern day Cartier Santos gents in a 41 mil with a quick change strap is a very, very versatile watch. As you can see by looking at the examples that we have here on the desk, there is terrific variety in a subtle way with the Cartier Santos, and that variety gives you the opportunity to be able to wear the watch in several different scenarios. You can wear the same Santos with jeans and boots. You could wear it with shorts and trainers, and then you could put your dinner jacket on and go out for dinner using the same watch. If you wanted to, with one of the modern ones, you'd be able to change the bracelet for a leather strap to give it a completely different feel altogether. Versatility is very important with the Santos. We were asked the other day if people are buying more Cartier than they used to. We've definitely seen an upsurge in demand for Cartier, particularly the Santos, over the last year or so. I think one of the reasons for that is that people are buying watches nowadays more towards their desires and their passions, looking more towards what they actually want to wear rather than what they feel they should invest in. And Cartier gives a totally different feel, it gives a different style, and it gives excellent value for money. If we take a couple of examples, if we take this Santos Carré automatic in bimetal, and you compared it to a lady's 34 millimeter automatic bimetal Rolex Datejust, the Datejust would be somewhere in the region of £8,000. This Santos would be somewhere in the region of £4,500. So there's a huge difference in price there. You take this for an example, this 41 millimeter blue dial Cartier Santos not only comes with an additional blue leather strap with the quick change system that the Rolex doesn't have, but if you compare it to an equivalent 41 millimeter blue dial Datejust, that watch would cost you somewhere in the region of £9,000, whereas this one is £5,500. So the value for money again is very clear to see and really quite tempting. Because of that increased demand and the fact that certain models are actually surprisingly difficult to get hold of, Cartier prices are rising. They're not rising in an inflationary balloon type way as some Rolex prices have done in the past, only to deflate and collapse again. They're steadily, healthily growing and developing, particularly the classic models like these 29 millimeter examples on the table here. So quite often what we see at Oakleigh these days is that either somebody will come in specifically looking for a Cartier, or they might come in not really knowing quite what they're looking for. They maybe try on a Rolex, try on an Omega, and then see that we have Cartier in stock and think, oh, maybe I fancy something slightly different, and they're led towards that. What they leave with is something that you don't see as often on the streets, something that gives you terrific value for money compared with the other major manufacturers, and something that is stylish and flexible that you really can wear with anything, particularly if you buy a modern version with the interchangeable straps. Cartier is an informed choice, and the Cartier Santos, as one of the most important watches ever made, is also a choice for the watch lover. I hope you've enjoyed that video. If you have, please like, please subscribe, please share, and we'll see you next time.